Venezuela denounces the U.S. aggression against its territory at the United Nations Security Council and called it a violation of international law and a threat to peace in the region and all the continent. In Honduras, Councilor Marlon Ochoa denounced fraud in the electoral process at a press conference and condemned the interference of the United States government in the elections. The Gaza Strip government media office condemned Israel's serious and systematic violations of the October 10 ceasefire agreement, documenting 875 breaches of the truce. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Sophie Fernandez from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Venezuela denounced the U.S. aggression against its territory at the United Nations Security Council and called it an imperial violation of the international law and a threat to peace in the region and all the continent. Venezuelan Representative Samuel Moncada said that the U.S. crime against the South American nation includes a declared naval blockade, the theft of 4 million barrels of Venezuelan oil, and an electronic warfare in the airspace. Moncada also affirmed that these actions respond directly to confessed attempts by President Donald Trump to arbitrarily grab the energy resources of Venezuela. Moncada also urged the UN body to take immediate action against the systematic violations of the international law, which represent a direct threat to the regional stability and set a dangerous precedent of armed intervention. Also, the permanent representative of Cuba to the UN, Ernesto Soberon, alerted the United Nations Security Council of the U.S. destabilizing attempts in the region and affirmed that this is part of a strategy through the Monroe Doctrine promoted by President Trump.
Critical that the country with the largest market for drugs in the world, whose territory finances its criminal business, promotes a war to supposedly combat this scourge in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's clear that its purpose is to justify the costly and extraordinary military deployment in the region with which it seeks to assault Venezuela and impose its hegemonic domination on the hemisphere. We alert the international community regarding these provocations that seek to further escalate the aggression against Venezuelan territory and seize its natural resources. Venezuela and any other state that is attacked has a legitimate right to defend itself in accordance with Article 51 of the Charter. All this in addition to the unilateral coercive measures, economic suffocation, campaigns of discreditation, and attacks against important institutions of this country that are part of the psychological war and increase of pressure by the government of the United States to overthrow the government of Venezuela. Mr. President, the new national security strategy of the United States, which includes the so-called Trump corollary to the Doctrine Monroe, puts into practice the idea that the Western Hemisphere is an exclusive zone of influence. It validates a dangerous doctrine of peace through force and enshrines intentional warfare as a policy of the state. It reflects the huge challenges confronted by humanity, in particular Latin America and the Caribbean region. The current government of the United States and its projection toward the region tramples on the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace.
On the other hand, permanent representative of Mexico to the UN reiterated that diplomacy and dialogue are the only ways to resolve differences between nations and affirmed that it is only up to Venezuelan people to determine its future.
The constitutional principles of our foreign policy, Mexico reiterates that it is exclusively up to the Venezuelan people to determine its political future. This is why we make an unequivocal and urgent appeal to all parties to prefer diplomatic channels, to act with restraint, caution, and avoid measures that could aggravate the situation.
The Nicaraguan representative expressed his country's support for Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, called on all the multilateral mechanisms to investigate and punish the U.S. actions of piracy in the Caribbean, and said that the United Nations could not be a passive spectator before the coalition of nations.
Appeal of the constitutional president Nicolás Maduro Moros and the conscientious leaders of the world to condemn these acts and to activate all relevant multilateral mechanisms to investigate, punish, and prevent these actions of economic piracy and aggression. The Security Council of the United Nations, the UN, has an obligation to protect international peace and security. It cannot be a passive spectator of the pillaging of a nation.
For his part, Colombian permanent representative to the United Nations accused the United States of carrying out a military escalation in the Caribbean, in flagrant violation of the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace and undermining the stability of the region.
The Caribbean have been proclaimed as a zone of peace based on clear principles: the prohibition of the threat or the use of force, the peaceful resolution of disputes, promotion of dialogue and multilateralism, strict respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, a non-interference into the internal affairs of states, and the inalienable rights of peoples to self-determination. The escalation of actions of a military character not only increases the risk of a greater conflict, but also, while it's contrary to international law, also undermines collective efforts to prevent conflict and undermines regional stability.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, during the Productive Engines 2025 exhibition, recognized that the country has been able to develop extensively in various economic sectors, despite U.S. aggression. In this context, the head of state pointed out that the telecommunications sectors must serve for the development of Venezuelans. Regarding tourism, the president explained that it must become a new source of foreign currency to boost the country's economic growth. The head of state also mentioned that these advances are recognized in a recently published document by the United States Security Council. In this sense, President Nicolás Maduro affirmed that the path of the country is absolute economic and productive independence.
Where are we coming from? From an economical war that was horrible, right? We all know what it's about. What did we do? Strategies, planning, intelligence, and adding the national will, the national union, and the national council of economy. We have doctrine, we have thinking, we have economical theory, we have strategy, we have actions. We come from great perturbations. And where we're going, where are we coming from? From an economical war that was.
And now we have a short break coming up. But first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Trinidad and Tobago, the release of drone images showing activity near the United States-supported radar installation at the A.N.R. Robinson International Airport is raising many questions and concerns among citizens. Our correspondent in Barbados, Crystal Hoyt, has more.
Are emerging in Tobago following the release of drone images by Guardian Media showing activity near the United States-supported radar installation at the A.N.R. Robinson International Airport in Crown Point. Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar says that the structures captured in the images are support offices connected to the operation of the radar system. But many question if a U.S. military base is being established on the island. The images show several trucks and utility vehicles inside a restricted area, along with temporary structures and portable facilities. At the national level, opposition leader Penelope Beckles says the government must clearly explain the purpose of the radar and the broader implications for the country, warning that the democratic accountability must not be sidelined.
The people of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly those who voted, are not little children. And they are paying very close attention to what is taking place, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, as it relates to Trinidad, Tobago, the radar, but as it relates to Trinidad and Tobago, the CARICOM region, and as it relates to what is going on, as it relates to Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela, as well as the United States.
In Tobago, opposition figures say uncertainty on the ground is growing, particularly as access to the site remains restricted and official details limited. PNM Tobago leader Ansel Dennis says the images have intensified concerns about transparency and public safety.
Well, it's quite interesting. It appears to me that somewhat of a military base has been established there. We've been given mixed messages regarding this situation. So I have absolutely no doubt that there is more in the mortar than the pestle. So this level of disrespect where we are seeing, based on that picture, what appears to be a military base established in our airport, in one of the most populous communities on the island. Tobagonians have been endangered by this government in a very disrespectful manner.
The government has not indicated whether additional information on the radar site or the presence of the U.S. personnel will be made public. Crystal Hoyt, teleSUR, Bridgetown, Barbados.
In other news, the U.S. Department of Justice released 30,000 more files from the Epstein case, including documents mentioning President Donald Trump. The Department of Justice, legally required to release the files, acknowledged Trump's appearances in a social media post and stated that some include false claims. Although an email dated January 8, 2020 shows that Trump mentioned in-flight records and notes that he traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously reported. All the Epstein case files were released after Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act in November. Meanwhile, in Honduras, Councilor Marlon Ochoa denounced fraud in the electoral process at a press conference and condemned the interference of the United States government in the elections. In this regard, the official presented 10 new audio recordings showing evidence of fraud in this special count. In this context, Ochoa rejected the erroneous decision to issue the declaration without having concluded the count. He also reported that 2 of his colleagues from the CNE plenary have been absent in person for several days, participating only through audio recordings. The councilor also stated that this election was conditioned, controlled and directed from abroad, so that the U.S. preferred candidate could win. Finally, he called for respect for the will of the peoples in this process.
All of the story of the first audios confirm that this election, once again, was an election conditioned, controlled, and directed from the outside of the country. The intervention, the foreign intervention in these elections has been the most vulgar and bold in all of the history of our country.
Moving on to Colombia, 18 soldiers were handed over after being held captive for 36 hours by an indigenous community in the department of Chocó. Local authorities announced that the delivery of the military personnel was achieved after 4 hours of dialogue between the Federation of Indigenous Councils Associations of Chocó and High Command. The Ministry of Defense denied that it was a kidnapping, stating that the soldiers were surrounded by about 200 people, and then they were taken to an indigenous reserve, while operations carried out against the National Liberation Army. We have a second short break coming up. Before, we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There, you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, but we'll be right back with more from the South. Don't go away. Welcome back. The Cerro de Trincheras archaeological site in the Mexican state of Sonora continues to celebrate its anniversary with various activities. To mark its 14th anniversary, the site is offering guided tours during the holiday season, in which visitors can learn more about the site's diverse cultural manifestations, such as its more than 900 farming terraces, some of which are over 150 meters long, and the rest of its heritage values. The exhibition, Cocospera Mission, Perspectives, Actions and Paths, was also inaugurated in this exhibition hall. The exhibition consists of 20 infographics that include 50 images and share information about the sites, its conservation and dissemination. The Gaza Strip Government Media Office condemned Israel's serious and systematic violations of the October 10 ceasefire agreement, documented 875 breaches of the truce. The agency reported that at least 411 Palestinians have been killed and 1,112 more wounded in Israeli attacks on Gaza since the ceasefire began. The Palestinian movement Hamas warned that these figures represent 25 ceasefire violations per day. These violations include killings, attacks on civilians, bombings, blocking humanitarian aid, and concealing information about prisoners and missing people. Hamas stated that Israel deliberately killed civilians, especially women and children, and exterminated entire families. In other news, a plane crashed transporting high-ranking Libyan military officials and crew members in Turkey on Tuesday, resulting in the death of everyone on board. The crash claimed the life of Lieutenant General Mohammad al-Haddad, Chief of Staff of the Libyan Army, along with 4 other senior officials as they were returning from unofficial visits. Turkish Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya says the wreckage of the private plane was found in the Haymana district, south of Ankara. It lost contact with the crew minutes after sending an emergency signal indicated a possible forced landing in the area. The accident is a big loss for the Libyan armed forces and the stabilization process. Authorities in both countries are investigating the chaos. Africa is not left behind in the climate challenges it faces in 2025, with severe drought and water crisis, especially in Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Madagascar. The dry spell, lasting 3 years, has had severe consequences, including a food crisis and crop losses at the beginning of 2025. 5 countries in the region have declared a state of national disaster due to the drought. Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Angola are still struggling, leaving the World Food Programme with $147 million to provide food and cash to 7.2 million people across the region until March 2025. The UN warned that extreme heat is a global health emergency, especially in North Africa, where heat waves trigger sandstorms and cause problems with access to food, water, and basic services. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Sophie Fernandez. Thank you for watching.